Hi, I'm Mike McCarty. I'm the head football coach here at Southern Arkansas University. Today, I want the opportunity to talk to you about quarterback development. In the meantime, if there's any questions you might have later on, you'll see later in a screenshot that I'll have our email address that you can contact me at any point and our phone number. And please, always feel free to come by and see us at any time. Look forward to getting to know you. Go Mule Riders. The throwing motion at quarterback is a coordinated turning of the entire body. It's similar to swinging a golf club or a tennis racket. When one aspect is out of whack, you end up relying solely on your arm, and when you're developing a young quarterback, that can be very hard to count on, and the consistency is hard to develop. So the whole thing that we're trying to do is create a great upper body coordinated shoulder turn. And then on the other part of it is to try to work hard on the platform, the lower body, and its coordination of turning with the throwing action. These next steps are things that they can use to correct themselves on the field, and you can use on the practice field and even during the games to help them with any problems that arise. So during this next section, I'll talk about the different facets of the throwing motion and what are the problems you can look for and things that you can do to correct it. So let's begin. The first one we'll talk about is anything to do with the upper body. Anything on that, if you're having high ball problems, if your quarterback is struggling, that it's throwing the ball high or a lot side to side to his target, it usually has something to do with the upper body action. These next steps are what we talk about and things you can look for to correct some of those high ball issues. First, we'll talk about the grip. Okay, this is important. And we'll have a video that'll follow this up. Each of these sections has a video that you can follow along with. But the grip, we're interested in making sure that it's comfortable. Okay, it's unique to everyone. I don't have any real strong beliefs other than to try to get as many laces covered as we can with the two index and middle finger. Okay, creating an L. So what we're hoping to do here is to try to get as many laces covered as we can so we can create spin. The reason spin is important is because if you're throwing in bad weather, whether it be windy, it's a little wet out, it's important that you have some of the lace so you can get some more generation of spin, which will cut through the wind and cut through the bad weather. So, and you'll see here where we usually have either our middle finger and our ring finger need to be touching or close to laces, usually on a 1 and 4. Or a 2 and 4 type of concept, depending on how big their hands are. If we have a light grip, okay, if they're having some elbow troubles, usually it has something to do with the fact that they're having to squeeze the ball too hard, and that creates a lot of strain on the muscles around the elbow, okay, and we want to make sure that they have a real light grip on the ball. Okay, like I talked about, you want to cover the laces with 1 or 4 on the lace count, or 2 and 5. Problems, if there's not enough space between your palm and the ball, there'll be a tip down when on the release. So you're going to see when you grip a football, we want to make sure there's space between your palm and the football. So let's take a look at this. Here's our standard grip. We want to make sure our index finger is pointed up the ball, and we try to create as much of an L with our thumb and forefinger. And then we get 1 and 5 or 2 and 4 based on how big their hands are. The more you can get the fingertips on the laces, the more spin you can create. Okay, so that's that 2 and 5, 2 and 4 range, trying to create the L with your thumb and forefinger. And it also, that L between your thumb and forefinger, okay, allows you for the opportunity to create that L. As my hand turns in this picture, you'll see that L creates the space that you want. If that's a C, okay, you got a problem. The next aspect to the upper body is a firm wrist on the throwing hand. One of the things that happens is that football players have a tendency to over-rotate their wrist as they pull the ball back. We find this to be rather tough because when you come through on the fall through, sometimes that makes it where your tip is not exactly where you're wanting to throw, creating a wobbly ball. So we talk about when you pull the ball away, making sure that you have a firm wrist as you go back. That should be a 3/4 turn from where you were pointing. You don't want a 90-degree turn from where you're pointing with the back tip and front tip. Okay? This, as you pull through, will create a wobbly ball. Okay? We'll look at that on film. You'll see here in the firm wrist aspect, right there, pause, okay, as he starts to pull the ball back, he wants to make sure that his palm stays straight down his inside of his forearm, because the back tip of the ball, as you see right here, we want to make sure the front tip doesn't go to 90, it stays at a 45, so when he comes to go through and throwing at his target, the tip will come back a little more readily where he wants it to point. If it doesn't get back to that point, it'll wobble. So we're really interested in firming up the wrist as we pull the ball back. You'll work it forward now. Okay? As he pulls the ball away, you can see how he's keeping his wrist firm. See how the tip never quite lows back? And right now we're doing a warm-up drill, so he's a little farther back, but it never breaks the wrist, and that way it won't wobble when you throw. So if your young man is having some wobbly issues, it usually has something to do with how he pulls the ball back and over rotates his wrist. Watch one more of these. Good. Number 3 is a coordinated shoulder turn. This is when it's kind of like swinging a tennis racket from back to front. You want to make sure your shoulders are coordinated. You want to keep your lead shoulder at the target until you start the forward motion. You want to make sure that that occurs so it keeps you in line as long as possible. Ways to keep your lead shoulder on the target as long as possible, okay, is take the ball from your lead hand. So if you're right-handed, you pull the ball from your left hand. You don't take your left hand away from the ball if you're right-handed. Okay? That keeps your shoulder in at the target a little longer. Okay? Keep your elbow that you're throwing with at chest level. Okay? We call that a hitch. If you have to drop the ball from that hand, you're going to have a tendency to be at 1, a slow delivery, and 2, it throws your coordination on the turn off. Okay? Keep your offhand, which would be your left if you're right-handed, close to your body. You don't want to push it out away from your body. Again, that opens up that lead up shoulder, which you don't want. You want to keep it in until you start the forward motion. And keep your head horizontal and still. Okay? One thing that happens if you had a stick go right down your body, there's a tendency if you lean right or left or forward, you would break that stick. And that usually means the coordination of your shoulder turn is not around the stick. You don't want to bend, you want to turn around the stick that goes right through your body. Now what we're looking at here on the coordinated shoulder turn is we want to make sure that he's right-handed, so we want to make sure that his lead shoulder is staying on his target, which is the chin of this quarterback, okay, as long as possible. In order to do that, he needs to take the ball from his front hand, and that leaves it in. Plus, don't throw your left hand out. All of it will keep that shoulder in as long as possible. You know, he does a nice job of taking the ball from his left hand here, and that keeps his target, and then he keeps his offhand a little close to his body. It doesn't have to be next to his body, just close. He does not throwing it like he's pointing. Okay, let's take a look. And that should coordinate that shoulder turn. Both are turning that shoulder, lead shoulder in. Take the ball from your front hand. Don't throw your front hand out. Well, another upper body issue that you can self-correct as a coach or as a player is your elbow level. This is all associated with your throwing arm elbow. Okay? We want to make sure both elbows stay reasonably within the armpit area and loose from your chest. You don't want them in tight. But it's real important that your throwing elbow never drops below that armpit level. And if it does, that's what creates that slow release. You know, if you're my age, the Dan Marinos were noted as having an extremely quick release. It wasn't because his arm speed was faster than everybody else. It was because when he pulled the ball back, he never dropped his throwing elbow, and he could get it out of his hand quickly. If you have to drop the ball or drop your elbow to create momentum, you're going to have, an ability for a defense to have longer to jump the routes, but it just creates an extremely inaccurate high-to-high throw at times because it's rhythmic. You don't want rhythm involved. Okay, let's take a look at it. Okay, here it's real important that he's creating a platform for his elbows. Okay, they're relaxed but at his sides. As he goes to rotate here, go ahead and move that forward, stop. Okay, this is what he has to maintain within that armpit level. Okay, if he dropped that elbow, that would create the ball to drop and he'd have to make a big swing to make a throw. He wants to keep that at his armpit level. Okay, that also keeps that ball from over rotating, as we talked about with the firm wrist, but it creates that quick release. Okay, so watch how that releases right there. Boom. You watch the far end, same thing, bang. Those are quick releases. Now our fifth and sixth things that you can help yourself with self-evaluation while you're practicing or in the game is what we call the follow-through. Okay, it's important that once you've released the football, what should your body look like? Okay, and we're talking about upper body only right now, so it's very important that we want to make sure that we finish with a straight arm, and it's got to be able to touch your hip on the left side if you're right-handed, or it's got to be able to touch your hip on your right side if you're left-handed. Okay. The other thing is, technically the ball leaves your hand when the palm is at the target, so we practice making sure that we are pushing our palm to the target, not trying to over-rotate. A lot of young quarterbacks have a tendency to think they're trying to create spin, so that to create spin they try to rip that thumb down to the ground or try to create a lot of rotation with their wrists. The ball's technically gone. The only thing you really do if you rotate your wrist too soon is get a wobbly ball. You push the back end off target. So what we try to do is always palm to the target, then finish with a straight arm and be able to touch your hip or leg. Here you go. The number 6 one is the head still and vertical. We talked about this briefly. Okay, this is another aspect. If you're getting a lot of high balls, a lot of problems, is because you're pulling your head off to one side, which opens up your lead shoulder. Okay, if your head is moving a lot off the vertical or horizontal axis, you're going to have a tough time not being a guy that throws the ball high or side to side. So we work real hard to make sure that we keep our head still and vertical, and that helps keep our lead shoulder in. Most of these things are in aspects of keep that rotation and coordination in line. You watch these two gentlemen, their head is still, okay? Their palm pushes to the target, and they want to be able to reach down and try to touch their hip or their leg. Head still, rotate around it. Head still, rotate around, finish through. Palm to the target. So in review, if you're having a quarterback with a lot of high ball problems, one thing you should look for first is their grip. Okay, you want to be sure that you have enough laces, that you've created an L with your forefinger and thumb, and you've got space between your palm and the ball. Okay, the second thing in review that we talked about was a firm wrist. When that firm wrist, as they pull the ball back to make the throw, they don't want to over-rotate their wrist. They want to keep their palm straight down. Okay, so we talk about just firm the wrist. Don't rotate your wrist, and that helps keep it, when you follow through, it keeps your tip at the target, and you won't have as many wobbly balls. So if they're a big wobbly ball guy, you want to be sure they're firm in their wrist on the way back. You'll see a lot of wobble balls when they try to overthrow or over-rotate, right? When you're really trying to crank it. So we want to try to avoid that. Coordinated shoulder turn. Okay, where it's really important that we're trying to make sure that we rotate in from front to back with that shoulder rotation. Okay, we want to be sure that we're keeping our lead shoulder in at the target as long as possible. We want to make sure that we're taking the ball from our lead hand. Okay, the longer you keep the lead shoulder at your target before you start the follow through, the better. If they're throwing their left hand, if they're right-handed away, that opens up the shoulder. We want to keep that. Also keeping our elbows, okay, at chest as much in your armpit area as possible relaxed is very important. Okay, that helps with quick release. It helps with all those high-to-high problems. The fifth one is the follow through. We always want to finish with a straight arm, okay, and our palm facing at the target when we release the ball. You don't want to start rotating that wrist. I never teach thumb to the ground or any of that kind of thing. That does help with straight arm, but it does not help the actual release. The ball is gone when your palm is at the target. So we emphasize that and then try to teach the straight arm after. Okay, keeping our head still and vertical. The sixth thing that they can help themselves with, the reason that's important again is to make sure that your lead shoulder doesn't come off target before it's supposed to. If you learn to rotate around instead of pull your head to the side, you'll keep your lead shoulder in longer. Okay. Now we're going to talk about our lower body. This is usually associated, all these next steps are associated with a ball that doesn't quite get to your target. A lot of people think it's arm strength. Most of the time it's your lower body strength or coordination. So we're going to work hard to make sure we can improve that. The first one, if you're having a low ball problem to look at, is the drive step. Okay, there's no magical distance. Everyone's a little taller, a little shorter, a little bigger, okay? But what we're trying to look for here is that they step where they can put all their cleats in the ground. When they hit the ground with that drive step, the lead step, they want to be sure that all their cleats hit with the ground. If their heel hits first, that's not good. It stops your hips from moving forward. If your toe hits first, again, it jogs your hips from moving forward fluidly. Okay? You want to make sure that they drive step to a flat foot, all their cleats in the ground. Okay? Then you want to make sure that you bring your hips. A lot of people want to bring their shoulders to their front foot. You want to bring your hips over the front foot. Okay? With a straight front leg. So it's almost like you're sliding your hips over your straight front leg. Drive step to a flat foot. Okay, this will help with your velocity because it helps you allow your hips to come through freely. Okay, now what we're looking at is this drive step, which is, he's right-handed, so we want to watch his foot. He wants to try to drive step for whatever length that he needs to put all his cleats in the ground. Okay, take a look. He's trying to get all his cleats on that drive step. That allows his hips to get through. Okay, watch it again. Trying to get to that flat foot on that drive step. Flat foot, we don't want anything to hit toe or heel first. Drive step, boom. Okay, very important. Okay, now we've talked about the drive step. Now the second thing to look for are my hips over my front foot. Not my shoulders, my hips. Okay, we want to be sure that we're trying to get that proper weight transfer to our front foot. Okay, and your hips should be over your front leg. Okay, they should be locked and straight. Okay. Okay, right here now you'll see as they start to deliver, they've got that flat foot, we've talked about that, and they're trying to make sure that their hips are over their front foot with a straight front leg. Let's watch. Drive step, hips over that front foot. He's not bending at the waist, he's at hips over that front foot. Okay, straight front leg. That keeps your hips to flow through very smoothly. Okay, now on our plant foot, when we're trying to transfer the weight to our front foot, our plant foot is always our throwing hand foot. So if you're right-handed, it's your right foot, that's your plant foot. Okay, and the key to getting your hips through is when you start that forward motion, is that you point your back toe straight to the ground. Okay, this helps get your weight transfer and your hips square and your belly button at your target. So we've already talked about front leg. We're trying to get the hips over, flat foot. We're also, as he starts with forward motion, as he pushes off, he tries to get those toe right to the ground. Watch the other, boom. Toe that keeps your, that opens your hips and gets them to the target. Gets all the weight off. I don't care if they pick it off the ground or not, as long as the toe is pointed to the ground as the ball leaves. Get that weight transferred, toe to the ground. Now this is big. Anytime your plant foot, again, if you're right-handed, that'd be your last step on your right foot. Okay, you want to make sure if you're throwing to your opposite of your arm strength, so if you're right-handed and you're throwing to the left, you want to make sure that you get your instep pointed at the target. Well, how do you do that? You want to, on your last step, you'll point the toe, okay, to the line of scrimmage, and that'll get your instep so you can swing and throw to your target. It really helps. This is a big deal. I'll show it to you on film. So a lot of times quarterbacks have trouble generating power when they're throwing left. The thing we found is making sure on our plant step when we're throwing left, I want my toe on the plant step when you're throwing to your left, if you're right-handed, to be pointed toward the line of scrimmage. Never let your heel hit the ground, and that'll make it where your instep is at your target and your hips will flow through. So let's take a look here. You'll pause it at the top. The last plant step, the toe is back to the line of scrimmage. It keeps my knee in. It allows me to drive step my target, and now my right foot instep, as you'll see here, my instep now is where I want it to be pointed at my target. So, but if I'd have planted normally, I'd have had a tough time. I'd have to rotate around my foot and knee. That would have been tough to generate power. Here I'm locked in. I've got all my power. My instep is at my target just because I pointed my toe to the line of scrimmage on my plant step. Watch it alive here. Boom, boom, bang. He turns it. You got an end zone of this just to let you see it. Okay. You'll see his right. Watch his last step. Bang. Toe pointed line of scrimmage. Opens his hips. Allows him to be accurate. Now our plant foot, when we're right-handed, is our right foot again. If we're throwing to our strong side, which is our right if we're right-handed, okay, we want to make sure that our plant foot instep is pointed at the target. Just like we worked on when we were throwing left, we were trying to get that plant foot instep where we wanted it. When we're throwing to the right, if we're right-handed, we want to make sure we get our plant foot instep pointed where we want. Let's take a look. Okay, you can see here, boom, I'm throwing to the right, and I want to make sure that my plant foot, my third step in this case, the instep is pointed at my target. If it was in the flat, I'd turn it even more. Turn your instep where you want it to throw, your right foot instep. See where it's at? It's at the target. Right where I want to throw. That generates all the power. You'll see in the end zone shot here, okay, that he gets his instep on this throw to the right, right where he wants it. Watch his right foot on his plant. He's got his instep pointed to the flat. Boom. It will generate a lot of power, a lot of accuracy. Very good. Okay, just to review again, if you're having some low ball problems with the quarterback, look at their drive step. Make sure they're drive stepping to a flat foot. Okay, make sure their hips finish over their front foot and they got a straight front leg. Also make sure that their toe is pointed straight to the ground on their drive step so they get their hips through. And then reviewing that the plant foot, always make sure that your instep is pointed at the target. When you're throwing to the left, point your toe to the line of scrimmage. You're throwing to the right, just put your instep where you want it to be thrown. You'll see here I've got a diagnostic chart to help you evaluate your quarterbacks. If they're dropping a lot of snaps, if you go ever underneath center, so few do it now, but if they're dropping a lot of snaps, it usually has something to do with their hands separating, okay? And the way to fix that is making sure your bottom hand is the pressure hand. The bottom hand is always the one pushing against the center, not the top hand. If they're having trouble being slow off the line, okay, usually means they're false stepping, okay? So you want to make sure they are pigeon-toed in their stance so they can't move it. Okay, if they're slipping, okay, You want to make sure that if they're falling as they're kind of trying to change out of their drop, okay, it might mean that their plant foot is a little outside their hip. Always make sure that plant foot is underneath their hip. Okay, if they're getting a sore arm, look at their grip. Try to loosen it up and move more fingers over the ball. Okay. If they're having wobbly balls, we talked about it, but make sure they have a tight wrist on when they're pulling the ball back. If they let that wrist fly too much, the ball over rotates and they're going to have trouble with wobbly ball. Remember, if it's a high ball issue, that's a lead shoulder problem usually. So make sure that offhand is not coming off the ball, that you're pulling the ball, your elbows are level. Okay, if you're having some low ball issues, that's usually something to do with the lower body. So be sure we're watching our plant feet and our drive steps and where our knee is. Okay, if you're throwing behind too much, okay, this is usually is based on where they're drive stepping. So if they're stepping at the target, that usually means they're going to have to throw across their body on a moving target. So you always want to open up in front or behind the target when they throw. Even in warm-ups, don't step directly at the target. Step in front or behind. Again, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. You're always welcome on our campus. We're very proud of our facility and what our program is becoming. We look forward to working with you if you're a high school coach in the future. You're always welcome on our campus to come visit, talk about football, X's and O's, offense or defense. Okay? And you can contact me at any point. If you have a recruit that we need to get involved with, don't hesitate to call. My phone number is on the board, also my email address, and I look forward to meeting you face to face in the future. Hopefully we can get through COVID sooner than later. Have a great day. Go Mule Riders.